I'm gonna call it an update review on the Lil Native. I'm not gonna call this a full review because I probably didn't quite use this totally long enough to do some things. I did not sharpen this knife. So let's call this an update review. I've been carrying this knife since I made my initial impressions video. It's been about 5 days. I've been using this knife for every possible thing I can, carrying it all the time, lots of different carrying ways, lots of different kinds of different pockets, different pants, different options, carried it in a shirt. So let's talk about my experience with this knife. I'm just cutting some notebook paper down into small sheets. So I'm kind of just choking up here and using a sort of pinch grip to do this. I might also go like that, we'll see. These are 2 pages thick. Super accurate. The tip on this thing is super good at this job. So the tip is going through very easily all the way through. This tip is awesome. It is going through very well without using any extra pressure. I notice already that the knife having a small handle makes it really, really good for this. Just really easy to aim. Wow, it's cutting all the way down on the scoring cut that I don't even have to do the pull undercut. So I'll do a couple of those like that, and then we'll see how it does just on the straight up pull through with no scoring cut. This knife is awesome at doing these scoring cuts. It's been really good. So it's hard to capture on film, but I'm really using very little pressure to make those scoring cuts. Here you'll see the knife goes offline just a little bit and I have to clean up the cut afterwards. I did not score these cuts first. I just am seeing if the knife can follow that fold. This went on for a while like this. I'm sure you get the idea. I broke down 4 36-pack boxes of these soda box cardboard boxes. However, I did not cut them into the 2.5-inch testing strips. I just cut all the sides and flaps off of these, as you see. Now I'm going to use this Lil Native to just cut the flaps, all of these sides off this box. So this is pretty strong cardboard. I'm kind of going against the grain. The grain's this way. And I'm going this way against those. So you can see the lines here. I'm going like this. So piece of cake. I'm going to talk briefly in sort of an overview terms about the Lil Native as a platform, as a general knife. Because this is my first experience with the Lil Native, it's the first time I've ever actually got to carry one. So I will talk about some things I noticed with that, but if you're interested about the Lil Native in general, I would encourage you to watch other people's reviews because I'm sure they will touch on many things that I don't know or that I didn't think of or that just didn't come to mind. From here out, you might notice this little glob of stuff right there. That's just residual mineral oil. I just wipe the blade down with mineral oil to restore the sheen of the black coating. Let's start out with the blade and how it performed. The tip on this knife is absolutely exceptional. This thing was amazing. In my footage where I was doing scoring type cuts like this knife's tip was absolutely phenomenal. I give it a solid A for those type of cuts for sure. In some cases where you need to kind of stab the tip into something, like wedge it into a little tiny space, like I like to use the example like if I have a new pack of gum, sometimes I'll jam this tip into the tiny little place where it's all folded over and try to get in there with as little effort as possible. Not too bad. CGRB pyrite for comparison. Five out of 5. 3.5 or 4 out of 5. This does not do as great at that. It doesn't do horrible, but due to the broadness of the blade, and this is not the thinnest blade for a knife this size, but it's not the thickest either. Anyway, those kind of poking into thing kind of cuts were just not quite as good as I expected this to be. But for scratching work and just general poking, this tip is extremely, extremely sharp and pointy, and it was awesome. This knife is not the most slicey knife. When I say slicey, I'm talking about kind of, I feel this the most when I'm trying to pass this knife through cardboard. This knife did fine, it didn't do badly, but I could feel the thickness of this knife's blade and the thickness specifically behind the edge. This knife is a little bit thick. It's not as slicey as a Delica. This knife is a worse slicer than a Delica. And I believe it's not even as slicey as the Sage 6. So this knife was less slicey than I expected it to be, but still performed adequately and perfectly fine in that regard. And it's kind of weird because it's a small knife, so it seems like it would just be kind of pass through material more easily, more thinly. Some of the tasks I did with this knife, just really quick, I broke down a pretty hefty piece of cardboard. It ended up being 7 feet that I cut of pretty good sized cardboard with this thing. And since this thing's such a small blade, that kind of adds up. I opened lots of Amazon boxes, lots of envelopes, lots of mail, lots of Amazon type packaging envelopes. And this knife has not been touched up. This knife has not been resharpened. This knife has just been doing the work and Haven't even passed it on a strop or anything like that. So it's doing just fine, and it has done a considerable amount of work for a knife this small. I did notice, especially cutting down the big 7 feet part of cardboard, it was actually quite a few cuts, and I did notice that the shortness of this cutting edge, because of this choil, this knife has a really short cutting edge. Like, let's actually hold the, like, look, it's not even that much bigger than my pen cap. So it's not the longest cutting edge. I did notice that a couple times when I was cutting cardboard, both the soda box cardboard and the actual box. I did notice, I kind of came out of my cut a couple times because I was expecting the knife to be a little bit longer. So I did notice that it was kind of an issue, but I'm not going to ding it for that because obviously this is a small knife. So if you bought this knife, you know you're not getting something giant. The handle, this is a very, very secure handle. I never had any trouble with it at all in any way as far as security or anything like that. Sometimes this handle felt a little bit fat this way. I don't know why. I think it's just, it is kind of a thicker handle for such a small knife, but it does really fit in my hand. It was never a problem. I just was like, oh, it kind of feels like, oh yeah, I've got a bigger handle than the Spyderco Dragonfly. So it was just kind of noteworthy, not the end of the world. This handle makes this knife very wieldy. I can hold this knife in many different ways, and it really cuts great. It really gives you a lot to hold on to, really gives you lots of handle options. The choil works great. I did notice, so very, very wieldy, meaning I can manipulate it and aim it, point it. It's accurate, it's dexterous. I will say that when I'm holding the knife this way, I feel like I just don't have quite enough handle. It feels like the knife is farther forward than it wants to be. And I had no trouble using the knife this way. I didn't feel like I had to move up on the choil, but if you want to have a full handle, you do need to kind of pull up on the choil, which is fine. There's no problem using this choil. That's totally a fine thing to do, but my instinct with knives is just to kind of hold them by the handle, and sometimes I forget to use the choil. This knife carries quite well. Again, sometimes it feels a little thick this way. So I'm gonna say this knife carried perfectly well, with one exception. And that is, it was a little bit tight coming in and out of the pocket. This clip is pretty tight. This clip does not move up and down very easily, so maybe that's it. And it just felt like between the tightness of the clip and this roughness of this G10, that what would happen is I'd go to insert it into my pocket, I would go to put it in, and it just, and this is a tiny thin piece of cardboard, guys. You can hear how tight that is. I'd go to put it in my pocket and it just kind of would get stuck right here and I'd kind of have to go, and then it would work. And same thing on the withdrawal. Sometimes I'd go to withdrawal and it would get stuck over the seam of my pocket and would just kind of stop. So sometimes on the insertion, it would just kind of hit the brakes and stop. And sometimes on the withdrawal, it would kind of hit the brakes and stop. So this clip is tight. This is very tight. So it was kind of a thing that's easily remedied. You can probably bend this. You could probably do some things to fix that if you want. If it were me, I would just leave it and kind of deal with it. But I'm mentioning it because it was a thing. This thing is orange. And some people aren't gonna like how visible it is, but it rides quite low. So there is not very much orange sticking out of your pocket. There is some, but it's not obviously like that. This is the military too, by the way. Cutlery Shoppe Exclusive, same kind of a thing. So it is a pretty low profile and there's not too much orange sticking out of your pocket really. There is some. So if you want a totally covert knife, doesn't show any orange sticking out of your pocket, this is not it, but it's pretty low. So carryability, the tightness is really the only thing I had a problem with. Otherwise it was totally fine. I carried out lots of different kinds of clothes, lots of different kinds of pockets. Action. All right, when I did my initial impressions, I mentioned that when I just hold this knife, I kind of feel like I want to find the hole here, and it makes me kind of miss it because the hole is kind of more in the middle of the knife than what I expect, and sometimes it makes my hand and my brain miscommunicate about where I need to line up. and it causes me to feel like I'm gonna miss. That did happen. During my real life use, I did have probably 4 or 5 times I would try to deploy the knife and I would miss the hole because it's further down than what I expect. Some of that could be my brain being stupid, talking to my hands stupidly. Some of it could be that I just didn't carry this knife long enough because it's only been 5 or 6 days or whatever. Definitely not a deal killer, but you maybe just be aware of it. If you get one of these and you're not used to handling a knife this small, you may miss the hole a couple times until you remember. So, not a deal killer. I'm just pointing it out because I mentioned it in my initial impressions, and that was a thing that did happen. So the compression lock on this thing works fine. Lockup is rock solid. I have no problem, no complaints, no nothing about that. However, there are some things with compression locks I've noticed on other knives. I'm not going to go into it too much in detail right now, but sometimes with this knife, I had an issue of this kickback, meaning when I go to close this knife, sometimes this little nub right there, the bottom part of the choil, what is this part? It comes all the way through to the top. It comes past this line here and sticks up ever so slightly. There it is, right there. You can see it. It sticks up past this point. When that happens, sometimes my finger's in there beyond, past this area, it goes in deeper than that, and then this little nub hits my finger and causes the knife hitting my finger. It's not this thing, it's this finger. It's hitting my finger in that compression lock and causes this bounce back. So I go to close the knife and doing, bounce back. Here's an example of it in real life. So this is footage of me cutting this envelope as I already showed. I get it cut. Now when I go to close the knife, bam, it didn't close all the way because it hit my finger. So that's not a deal breaker either. It really isn't. But just be aware that that is a thing. With compression locks, sometimes this happens. This is not the only knife that's done this to me. I could do a whole video about it. Maybe I will. But this knife did do it. That nub does stick up to the point where it touches my finger. Everybody's hands are different. If your fingers are fatter than mine, thicker, more muscular, it probably will happen to you less. My friend who sometimes helps me with videos and knife stuff has thinner fingers at the tip than I do. And this would be a much more egregious thing for him. This would bother him more than it's bothering me. So I'm mentioning that. This kickback thing does happen, but not a deal killer. So I just want to report kind of on where this edge is right now. I have not touched this up at all. Has not been stropped, has not been anything. So this is just the knife carrying the work that I've done with it, cutting up a few cardboard boxes, cutting down some soda box cardboard, opening lots of packages, opening lots of mail, whatever. This XHP has pretty much no bite left this way, but the apex still feels very, 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 very thin. Doesn't feel flattened out, doesn't feel plateaued. The edge feels very, very grabby still this way. Still feels extremely sharp. Give it a shaving score here. It is still shaving arm hair. This thing is still cleanly, gosh dang it. Anyway, I got up a whole crap ton of arm hair. This thing is still clearly shaving arm hair much, much better than scraping it. So in terms of my scale of sharpness, 5 is shaving very, very well. This is like slightly less than that, but this still is better than most factory edges come, even for Spyderco, to be honest with you. So I'd probably give this like it's very close to a 5. I don't know, 4.8, 4.9, somewhere like that. Typical Spyderco edges out of the box to me are 4.75, and it feels sharper than that. I did not think it was going to shave that good, and it did, so I'm actually pretty impressed. I was just about to say, going to this part of the review for the sharpness, I was going to say that I think this is the time when I would touch this knife up. If I'm trying to, I always like to keep my knives really, really sharp. I could continue to carry this now with this edge without even feeling uncomfortable about it. Sometimes when I'm reviewing a knife, I have to carry it to a point where it's duller than what I like. And since this is still at least as sharp, if not sharper than most Spydercos are, I'd be perfectly fine just putting this back in my pocket. I did not think it was going to shave that well, so I'm surprised. So this is just regular catalog paper, same as what I typically use. Little tiny snag in it, just the littlest thing there in the middle. It's a little rougher than I would like, but this thing's extremely sharp. So XHP, great steel for me. If you're in the market for a smaller type knife, this may just be exactly what you're looking for. The best thing this knife has going for it, in my opinion, is the steel. I love XHP. I love it. I love it way better than S30 or S35. I would take Spyderco's XHP over Spyderco's S30 or S35 every time if I had a choice. So I love it. I also absolutely love the way these orange knives look with the black blade. I like these Cutlery Shoppe orange with black Spyderco's much better than the orange with regular silver blades. These orange and black knives look so cool. I love it. Absolutely love it. And that's just me. I think people are either going to love it or hate it. I love it. When this knife is in a pile of other knives that are just general gray, black, OD green, it just stands out. It just, you know where it's at. You know where to find it. And it just looks awesome. I love it. Again, that's just me. You might hate it. If you hate it, don't buy it. Overall, if you're in the market for a Lil Native or a type of knife that's smaller, but yet rugged, compact, but strong, this is probably the knife for you. If you're okay with orange, I would jump on this thing. I think they're great. I love it. I'm super glad I bought it. I have no regrets about it. I've tried to point out some honest things I noticed that were great and some things that were kind of middle and some things that were kind of meh, but none of them are a deal killer. There are several things about this that are kind of medium, but there's nothing in there that would keep me from carrying this and proudly owning it and using it and having it be a part of my life. I will just say, Cutlery Shoppe's Exclusive Military 2 is still available. If you guys are in the market for a giant, cool orange and black knife with amazing steel and a smaller one, these are an awesome 1-2 combination, in my opinion. So these things are still available. They still have them. I think they're going for 199 bucks, which in my opinion is a steal. These things are just about 170, which is only about $5 more than the non-coated G10 Lil Natives. So if you got a coated, the coating usually adds $10 to $15, I think. So for a coated blade, it's basically the same price or slightly even less than what you'd pay for a normal black handled G10 Lil Native and S30V. That's what I have to say about the Lil Native. I enjoyed carrying this thing. Again, I didn't even do a resharpening because it didn't need it, but this steel held up great. I have no complaints about the steel at all. It's awesome. I love it. Love this knife. Enjoyed my time with it. If you're into a smaller knife and you're okay with orange and black, I highly recommend you get these from Cutlery Shoppe. Thank you. Thanks for watching.